Okay. So Brian, as you know, we spoke before about my, ambitious and idealistic startup idea for Rhetor. And, the questions that you have posed to me are definitely some that I've been giving a lot of thought to and making sure that we actually put action behind it. And so we've been growing our media team and our ability to kind of bring media products to an audience. That growth has been slow to start, which is okay, but we've been building a strong foundation. So we just wanted to kind of talk to you about what we've been up to and get your thoughts on that, and kind of, just see what your thoughts are based on, your years of experience in the space, and kind of see if you could help point us in the direction that you think would be helpful. So
I'll do anything I can. I love what you're doing and would love to be helpful if I can.
So Nick, we didn't talk about your background though. So do you want to go ahead and share with Brian, how you got involved and
yeah,
why you're a unique fit for us?
Sure. So I began my career as a journalist in the writing, but I mean, obviously, kind of as you probably know, the journalism nowadays isn't as segmented as it once was. You kind of are trained to be a multimedia journalist. So I kind of specialized in writing, but I also did video pieces and audio pieces as well, covering specifically the education beat for my student newspaper. And I also did a fair amount of blogging as well. And from there, I fell in love with education and just kind of being a part of the blogging community. And I wanted to kind of improve my skill set through teaching. So I spent 3 years as a writing tutor, also speech and different media stuff, because obviously nowadays students aren't just writing basic text anymore. They're doing multimedia text in academia. So I covered some of that too. Went to graduate school for rhetoric. And I continued to tutor, and also I began teaching as a graduate teaching assistant. Still I kind of decreased my studies now. I'm only going to take like a class a semester because I wanted to work more professionally. But how I found Rhetor was I actually was interested in starting my own business, and I did start my own business in the rhetoric field, basically as a consultant for people to help communicate their ideas effectively. And Lorenzo and I met, and it's kind of funny because I had like a very, very similar idea to Rhetor, but it was one of those things where it's like it didn't feel like my baby, kind of in a way. Like it was like, man, this is a really good idea, but I don't think I'm like the leader for this. So when I met Lorenzo, it's kind of like a really serendipitous moment for me to be like, oh wow, I care about journalism, I care about civilian journalism, and also I care about, obviously through my company, helping people become more rhetorically effective and helping create community from that, and using rhetoric to kind of solve our problems rather than try to fight each other with it. So that's kind of my background. And this is kind of, like the culmination for me of all the things that I've done in the past. So it's really exciting for me to be a part of this team.
Cool. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you. Do you want to, I looked at your LinkedIn profile, but do you want to give me a short little speech, just like in your own words?
Well, I've done a bunch of different jobs, almost all of them in the media business over the years. I've run a couple of fair-sized media companies, And, I think if one believes in vocations, I am a writer by vocation. And that led me to running media companies because it's fun to be in business close to the thing that, you're close to that fundamental motivation, I suppose. I'm perfectly agnostic when it comes to platform. I don't favor one mode of communication or over another, really. But storytelling is very much a natural activity for me. And so I've managed to engage in business using that impulse to be a storyteller in a variety of ways. So you saw LinkedIn. I mean, my companies have ranged from, little $2 million a year startups to $30 million a year multi-platform, multi-title publishing companies. And at the moment, I'm part of a group that looks like we might raise $1 billion to buy local news media and start local news media. So that's my current pursuit.
Wow. That's also something that we kind of aspire to do eventually, I think. More on the civilian level to kind of like install local news and to get people to do it.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, and I think that's extremely cool. And, there's no model now. The model is in a state of flux. So who knows what's going to work?
Yeah.
One of my goals is to keep high quality local news out there while the model gets settled.
Yeah.
Because I think we may be many years away from the model achieving any kind of the business model achieving any kind of stability.
Thank you.
How can I help?
Yeah.
So right now, back to your point about not being, preferential towards any platform specifically, and just, the passion for storytelling in general. We actually had that conversation the other day just about storytelling and where, we want to put our energies. We've developed a few different show platforms that show formats that we want to do. One of which is what we're doing right now, just kind of letting people have an inside view of what we're doing. We have a podcast, which is getting better as far as a production quality. We are working on distribution with that. We just changed our RSS provider so that we're actually distributing to a lot more places, because before we were using a platform that didn't do that. So I guess right now the question is we're trying to figure out what our focus should be from a getting our name out there. How the best practices of that. As a media voice, and just is it just a matter of just putting out content, or what do you find to be the best?
Wow. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, there are really two contradictory approaches to that. The long slog is to put out lots of content, optimize it, promote it through the social media, and just grind away at it. And over time, audiences grow. And the longer you're around, the more the better your search engine performance, because the search engines respect longevity. The other method is to go for the big hit that establishes your brand in a big way by being newsworthy, and so a lot of the podcasters, particularly like the true crime podcasters, they just show up with a story that's compelling enough that a few million people subscribe to their work, and that generates tons of attention. They get reviews and press coverage, and they're established all of a sudden. Those two, I mean, you can do both at one time, but the first option of building traffic over time is incredibly labor intensive, and you just might not want to spend 5 years of your life that way. So the other option is to do something with enough glitter on it that it gets a lot of attention. But of course, that is dependent on you finding the story that has that kind of engagement potential and then producing it in a way that grabs people's attention. So I think if I were young guys like you, I might be looking for that big hit, you know. I might be trying to write a single, as it were. But you know, and then once you have a hit, then you can concentrate on the plumbing. Then you can concentrate on building traffic, you know, with real engagement and deep identification with your brand. Now, with your subject matter, I don't have a story in mind. I'm just kind of talking about this in a conceptual way.
No, that makes perfect sense, and I think we do have that. That kind of leads me to my next question. I think we have a few different things that we can play around with and try to coalesce around in terms of production. I think one of the big things that we're looking at as well is, you know, right now we are building our team. What would be some of the things you would suggest for us as early as we are? In terms of getting, you know, more people on board to help with production and things like that? How do you attract those folks? It's a chicken before the egg thing. I understand very, very much people want to be paid, and I understand that makes sense. But we also are limited in budget. So, you know, I think that's a very classic, you know, question mark when it comes to the startup space.
I actually think you might be better off grabbing volunteers wherever you can, because then you build a stable of people who are excited about your mission, you know, really are lined up with you in terms of mission. But the best way to, in my experience, to recruit those people is to give them airtime. Let them produce shows. Let them write. Let them get on the air. You know, and This American Life is a great example of, I mean, I think he just had a dozen young people producing shows, and then he would take the ones that turned out best and put them on the air. And in the process, he built this extraordinary stable of storytellers who are still producing for him today. And I believe he started that out by just telling people, hey, you got a story you want to tell? I'll give you a hand with production and give you all the guidance I have time to give you. And if it turns out great, I'll put it on the air. And, you know, young people are willing to put hundreds of hours into something if it has the potential for putting them in that role of being the lead storyteller on a podcast or, you know, a short film or you name it. You know, there's a lot of creative young people who would like to be given that kind of opportunity. So I think in some ways you'd be better off not paying people to start out with, just to see who shows up. Now, in the long slog, when you're doing search engine optimization, you're probably not going to find anybody who will do that for free. If you do, that'd be really cool, but it's not as exciting as being on the air, that's for sure. And most people who know search engine optimization don't do it for free.
Yeah.
Do you have a copy of SEO for Dummies? I do.
I don't.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's something that we've been, and to that point, I think that we should double down on our efforts for that, and kind of like you said, focus our efforts on that, and then we get a little bit more of the volume, and then we can, for us, kind of work on the hit single like he was talking about, because that's my role, is especially with my writing and tutoring and teaching background, is I coach our media team, and I'm just kind of a resource for them. So it's the benefit to them is obviously distribution and coaching. And so you're kind of not alone in your content creating journey, and obviously you have the airtime too.
Yeah, and everybody loves to be on a storytelling team. It's fun.
It is, yeah. And I've had this idea, and I don't know if you've seen it in the updated like media strategy, Renzo, but I have like specific beats that I want Rhetor to cover.
Yeah.
I believe 5, politics, business, science and technology, and environment kind of also fits in science and technology, but it's like a semi-different field. So we can kind of focus our efforts towards getting one for each of those, then I think that'd be pretty strong.
Those are good. Those are good beats and good general categories. What'll be more critical to defining Rhetor as a platform is getting the voice right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's very tricky. You know, people who do that well, usually there's one leader who basically puts an imprint on everything, and people underestimate, I think, how unique the voice needs to be to stand out. But if you look at any of the major success stories, Serial, This American Life, Freakonomics, Radiolab, they have very, very distinct voices. And one of the things they did well at the outset was defining their show with a unique voice. And that seems to be very important, since they all have that, you know.
Yeah, that's definitely something to think about too, and just in the coaching process, and because that's obviously something that individual content creators are going to struggle with too, not only us.
Well, and you're going to need to be, I think, my instinct is that in a startup like yours, you're going to need to be fairly assertive with those writers, with those producers, in imposing Rhetor's voice on them, so that, you know, everything that Rhetor puts out sounds like it comes from basically the same mentality, the same personality.
And to clarify, I think it's the way I picture it, and tell me if I'm wrong here, that it's kind of like a two-sided concept that you're doing here, where like obviously as Rhetor you want to portray a certain ethos, but like wouldn't you also say that it's going to be their own flavor too, just like Freakonomics and This American Life, that you're going to have to play to the individual strengths too?
Oh, sure. But I think most people who listen underestimate how much the executive producer had to do with how the story was told. And although there's, you know, half a dozen different voices on This American Life week in and week out, they all kind of sound like the executive producer. You know, there's a very distinct quality to what they do.
Yeah, no, that helps me out a lot.
It's like quality control, brand continuity, making sure that everyone who, engages with it. It's just like, the logo, right? No matter what platform we're on social media, people could see the same color palette, all that good stuff. Same
Yeah,
voice.
it's true. It's true of voice too, I mean, look, just speaking very frankly, if you're not a kind of slightly whiny Gen Xer, then you don't get on This American Life. That's what they do, and it's kind of cool. I always know I don't particularly like flaccid, whiny Gen Xers, but I like This American Life, and that's what I expect when I go there, if you get my drift.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Because then just like any show, they know what to expect in this. They like that repeatability.
Absolutely. I compare a lot of all of our work to what stand-up comedians do. They create a persona, and then they operate within that persona, sometimes for decades. And it isn't necessarily, I don't think Chris Rock is really anything like his stage persona in person, but that's his vehicle for the stuff he says, And furthermore, then he goes out and he does 30 shows to figure out which jokes are funny to his audience, and he whittles his whole thing down before he does one of his specials. We're all in the same business, so we create a voice, and then most of us use web metrics to look at how our stories are affecting people, and then we start whittling what we do down to the jokes that work. I think that's kind of the business we're all in today.
Yeah.
But once you have a persona, you really have to operate within that persona. A different persona is a new brand, it's a new voice, and it's a new direction. For a Rhetor to be successful, I think it needs to have a persona.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have the beginnings of that. There's something very appealing about the work you've done so far. It has a kind of intense sincerity about it that I think is cool. And it feels like something you could probably build on.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you suggest any kind of like exercises that we can kind of do to help flesh that voice, that persona out?
Well, so one thing I do is I read stuff out loud, even if it's written by somebody else. If I'm distributing it through one of my brands, I will sit down and read the thing out loud in my own voice to see if it works with my rhythm, with my, whether I feel natural in it. And then I will alter it until I do feel natural in it. Even stuff I write myself. I'll write it one day, and tomorrow then I'll go and I'll read it out loud. And anything that doesn't work right in my mouth, I change on the page, because I think that's kind of where voice comes from. And so if you define Lorenzo as the voice or Nick as the voice, then whatever you produce, I would use the exercise of reading it out loud, and maybe reading it out loud to each other to get a sense of how it feels as an audio product. Even if you're going to distribute it in writing, I still think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually used to do that. That is, without a doubt, like the biggest writing tool that I used in tutoring is having the student read their own work out loud, because they actually catch a lot of their own mistakes, and it's like a great proofreading thing. This is the application we used it for, but it's the same thing. It's kind of bringing it to life. And it's funny because rhetoric essentially would be the root word for writing and orating, speaking.
And it's interesting that you say that too, because things that I've written as my copy, Nick will get a hold of, and there's a different cadence and flow to it, and we definitely have to, make sure that as a team we are doing whatever we got to do to make sure that gets distilled.
Yeah, and so where you have more than one writer in the room,
Mm-hmm.
if you're working on a comedy show, the way that works is you might have 5 writers in the room that are putting ideas in and putting chunks in.
Mm-hmm.
But then until whoever, Jerry Seinfeld, walks in and starts reading through the script, you don't know which jokes are going to stay and which you're going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the two of you, if you don't want to decide that it's either Nick or Lorenzo, you might find somebody who you kind of like as a storyteller, whose delivery you like,
Mm-hmm.
and have them be your arbiter, as it were. Have them be the person whose voice is the ultimate test of the writing.
Yeah,
So that,
go ahead, sorry.
I
Go
just
ahead.
gonna say, otherwise you're liable to flip back and forth
Yeah.
between 2 voices, and it'll be harder to establish a brand around that.
Totally, yeah. Lorenzo, what were you gonna say?
Well, I just want to, you're the voice, and I think it's kind of like, since that's your role, and that's the trust that we put into you as the EP, right? I think it's kind of like when you have, for me, thinking politics, when a politician has a speechwriter, that person oftentimes will write a whole speech. So Nick and I think we'll talk, we'll just discuss, and then from now on, I'm gonna entrust Nick with the voice, but we'll definitely talk about that and how to get on the same page. But he's gonna be the belly button on that for sure.
Well, I think it's something that kind of revolves around conversations that we've had before too. So it's not like that wasn't kind of already going that way. It is just nice to kind of hear it out loud, and then it kind of focuses our efforts so we don't get tempted to have multiple voices, so we can kind of have a system of elastic, and that process-wise helps a lot, I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
we fleshed out a lot.
We did, but I mean it's that is just a good tip. So and I don't know how much you've worked with like new media creators, but I mean how do I phrase this? Do you foresee any? I mean, obviously there will be problems with trying to enforce that voice, but like, do you think that there are things that we can do to make that not so like demanding and kind of just like suggest it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what you're. I think I understand. I think
people away.
Well, I think I understand what you're asking. This storytelling business has always been fraught with confrontation. You're going to have writers who have their own thing going on in their head that they really want to get out there in the world, but they need distribution to do it. So they can either build that distribution for themselves, but if they use your platform, then they, sometimes they have to be schooled. And sometimes you need to tell them, hey, it's a Rhetor thing, and this is going to sound like Rhetor, or we're not going to air it. We're not going to produce it. And, that's just the business. National Geographic historically paid, 40 years ago, they paid writers 6-figure salaries to do one story a year, But every story that ran in National Geographic sounded like the same person wrote it. It was one thing. They had really, really rigid voice constraints. And so they never had a hard time finding writers, even though they were going to scrub every ounce of individuality out of what you were doing. Hey, everybody wanted to go to Afghanistan and write a 5,000-word story about it. And if it was going to turn out sounding like every other National Geographic story, oh, well, you know, it was still
still got to go do it.
It was still a cool gig. And so, you know, I'm personally somewhat skeptical of the idea of crowdsourcing storytelling, because most people I don't want to listen to for 40 minutes. You know, you know, most people can't hold my attention for 40 minutes. When somebody can, then they become a star, you know, then they become somebody important to me, and I show up for their storytelling. But man, that's a really, really small minority of people who have that gift. If you establish that kind of relationship with me through Rhetor, then you've got me forever. I'm going to go look every time you come out with something new. But if you hit a clinker 2 or 3 times in a row, I'm gone. And so I think you kind of have to take responsibility for the quality of stories you're producing and maintaining that consistency of voice, even if it means, you know, sometimes writers get mad at you. Well, you know, par for the course.
For sure, and that's something that I think will help too, since we want to, you know, obviously there's going to be a slight separation between, you know, the official content we produce and like the stuff that people are going to be able to put on our website as civilian journalists.
Absolutely.
But that's something that we wanted to create a system where people are working with an editor so they can kind of acquire that voice, and they can kind of, because then that's people that we can kind of raise through the ranks too.
And the fact that you have that open forum is going to allow you to recruit and to screen people.
Exactly.
You know? I love that. Exactly. Because you can say, hey, you know, post it. It's great. It goes over there in our open forum. And then you watch the traffic and you think about whether it fits with Rhetor, and you'll be able to cherry pick the people who can really produce for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really kind of like a Uber model, almost, like where, and Lorenzo has said this, but like we kind of have an army of journalists without owning, you know, the paying them, kind of like they're just want to be a part of this brand. Paying something we've talked about too, like a YouTube kind of partner thing too, but so I shouldn't say that outright, but like we can kind of coach them through a system of journalism that we have designed, and we have a whole army of journalists, and that's what's really cool about it.
And it could be their big break. I mean, you know,
good, for sure. We hope it is.
18 years old, and somebody paid me $25 to go have an experience and tell the story. And I still remember exactly how that felt. I could not believe somebody was paying me to have so much fun. You know, it's the best thing ever. And there are people out there who would feel exactly the same way today. And some of them are going to be perfect for Rhetor. And others may go on and become famous some other way. But
and that's awesome. That only is a good thing for us, you know.
That's awesome. But I think you know, you treat people kindly, compassionately, and with respect. But you let them know at the outset, if you're going to get on the Rhetor channel, it has to be a Rhetor piece. And so we either, you know, have a successful collaboration or we don't, but we have quality control, as Lorenzo said.
Yeah. Wow. I just have like.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well,
a little comment.
part of the thought process behind that is if you look at news right now, whenever, it breaks, a lot of times what they often do is they're using someone's phone anyway. They're using someone's, the citizen journalist content to begin with. It's usually not, a channel getting to the scene and doing the work. Couple that with a generation that is literally, I know when I was in elementary school or really middle school, most of what we did was PowerPoint. Now you have kids who are growing up editing their own stuff to a very, very quality level. So I think the opening for citizen journalism, if we do it right, is there.
Yeah, but until I encounter a channel that truly thrives with a multiplicity of different voices, I'm going to be skeptical about it.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, if you have a model in mind, you should copy them, whoever that is that you love. I just know that Medium is not a place that I want to go browse for content, I don't personally know of a media brand that has that multiplicity of voices that shows up on my radar that engages me. But hey, if you do know of a model like that, you should totally copy it. I am sorry.
Well, YouTube is such a model. I mean, media is mostly, written word, but YouTube is full of creatives in general, but they're not exclusively around news content. So we would focus, that space towards a certain subject matter and see how.
Do you think that YouTube is really thousands of different channels, though?
I think it's thousands of different voices, yes.
And I mean, my notion of how they operate, and this may be wrong, but my notion of how they operate is that they have millions of people, I mean, hundreds of millions of people in the audience, and each of those individuals has his or her own channel. And so nobody's like kind of on the general YouTube channel. I mean, I'm on the Bryan channel when I'm on YouTube,
well,
right?
You become an influencer, and you become a YouTube partner, and that's based on, whether or not you become big enough to get their attention. Because influencers are, in a way, partnered with the platform itself. And that's kind of what we see ourselves doing from a journalist perspective, is if you have that gravitas behind your creative, we bring you on board to the platform to work directly with us.
That might be the new model, Lorenzo. It's a really cool idea.
Well, and to Lorenzo's point too, there are like basically little conglomerates of channels, and they kind of end up teaming up. They all support similar content, just like Rhetor would it with journalism. Like a comedy show, a grouping of comedy shows come together, and they make this group of comedy shows. They all keep their kind of own channel, but I think that they kind of team their efforts. So it would be kind of similar to that, but also not exactly. And to Brian's point too, I think we're still going to want to have a definition of what is good Rhetor content, and then you're going to have to kind of strive to be that, because we want to set an example too. We don't want just anything going on this forum. We want to try to guide it towards an ideal that we're striving for as a company.
Yeah, it's a great point. The other thing I would say is the medium is going to be effective for some subjects and not others. So whether you're talking about video or podcasts or written word, those things are better for some subject matter than others. And I'm not sure there's ever been a very good business video ever done, business news video. Even if you go to Forbes, where they spend jillions of dollars, it sucks because business news video sucks.
You gotta read it.
Yeah, but if you want to read it, right? Or no, or you want to listen to it on your commute, that works great. But the video thing is just terrible. But if you're like free skier, right? Well, then video is the be all and end all of what you do. So it's, that's another thing to sort of be aware of, is depending on what you're covering, what your subject matter is, one medium or another may work better for you.
We're students of Gary Vaynerchuk, and one of the pieces he puts out is respect the platform. So, and that's the distribution question. We're going to tell these stories, and we're going to say written, spoken, or audio, and then we say, okay, based on our format of storytelling, where are we going to distribute it? Through respecting that platform and what that. Okay.
And talent. There are people, there's probably somebody out there who can do for business what Anthony Bourdain did for food. I have not seen that person yet, but talent is talent, right? What's the guy writes books with a little squeaky voice? David Sedaris. You know who David Sedaris is?
Yep, I do.
Well, he's a writer. And I never would have dreamed that he would be better as a podcaster or as a audiobook guy. But he just reads in a way that's super interesting. It's weird, but super interesting. So, you just never know. You got to try it out, I suppose.
Yeah. And that's something that I think that the model that we're doing with civilian journalism is going to be kind of helpful, because we can help answer, process some of these questions for these new journalists kind of coming through, and help them in their learning and their practice of journalism. So
and watch your metrics. You'll be liable to find some diamonds in the rough in the process of doing it the way you're doing it. You might stumble across some great talent.
For sure. I think we will.
One big thing we're trying to figure out, because right now, based on even just this format we want to look at doing an in-studio kind of format where we have, an in-person show.
Yeah.
So what's your advice on that? What are the pitfalls or things you want us to be looking out for, kind of to frame our thought process there?
Well, you should look. It's always a good idea to look at what is already successful in the format.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you're going to find that the edgy host is on the in-studio stuff is pretty successful. So you've got, what's the comedian who does it from his garage in California? Marin. His first name.
Say that again.
Oh, there's a comedian who does a show. His last name is Marin, Maron. I can't remember his first name. But name them. I mean, anybody who does the in-studio thing very successfully is a pretty kind of edgy, the great thing about in-studio is the unexpected revelation, the chemistry between the host and the guest, the adrenaline that is generated in a conversation. And so, a stack of prepared questions and a very safe guest, generally speaking, doesn't make very good studio work. What makes great studio work is the unexpected, the spontaneous laughter, all the stuff that makes a conversation interesting, I suppose. But I think it's a good idea. I personally really like the audio quality of the in-studio, and I like good conversation. But the interviewer, you can't play it safe. I think you want to get the emotions flowing in that context, and make sure that people have a reason to emotionally connect with the guest.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Nick, do you have any questions about that?
No, honestly, I think my brain's full of stuff that we have to think and talk about, honestly.
Well, I
yeah,
hope
it's
this
been really
was
helpful,
useful.
though, honestly.
I hope this was useful. Take it all with a grain of salt. I mean,
no, it's been absolutely a revelation to me, at least. It was speaking right to me. I feel like I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
I'm so excited about what you guys are doing. I love this
Thank you.
initiative, and hey, all the best luck. And I'm happy. If you ever think I can be useful in any way, just give me a jingle.
Thank you so much.
Hey, can I add you on LinkedIn?
Oh yeah, you can even add me on LinkedIn. Absolutely.
That's how we spoke today. That's how we reached out.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. We'll keep in touch.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Bryan. We really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Nice to see you guys.
You too.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take it easy.